So I have the privilege of introducing Sharon Robson, who is our speaker today. I've worked with Sharon for a fair
Oh, yes.
while. It's a number of decades now, and but Sharon is one of the most gracious thought leaders that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. Sharon brings a phenomenal depth and breadth of experience, and she asks the hard questions that the rest of us often skirt around. And today, Sharon's going to be talking to us about agility and business adaptability, and it's not what you think. Sharon, over to you.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, I was talking to Shane before we started this session, just as we were setting everything up. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. And I was explaining that this is actually one of my favorite topics. And the reason that it's my favorite is because when we start to talk about agility, everyone gets a little bit confused. And when we start to talk about business adaptability, people think that they're different things, but they're actually not. So what we're going to talk about today is agility and how it relates to business adaptability and how we can really take what we know around Agile as a concept and as an approach to creating value, and we can apply it outside of IT. So I'm going to get going. And I'm just basically going to say that this is generally what people think agility is. People think agility is all of this mumble jumble of jargon and special words and very distinctive activities or ceremonies. They think that you've got to have, advanced degrees in JIRA. You have to be officially codified by Microsoft, and you've got to be able to leverage every sort of collaborative tool that there is before you can call yourself agile. Now, this is the best thing about agility, is every organization does agility differently. There's no one true way. So whenever you start to see the jargon and whenever you start to think about the mechanics of agility, the first thing I'm going to say is I, Sharon Robson, give you permission to make it up for yourselves, because that's what agility is. There is no way that any organization can take a framework that works in software development and apply it to marketing with just a cookie cutter approach. You can't take something that works in product creation and innovation and apply it in a finance paradigm. You just can't do that. So what I want you to do is, when we start to talk about agility in the next little while, is just step back from the mechanics of agility. These are your safety nets. These are the easy bits. These are the bits that everyone sees. But that's not what actually agility is. So what is agility? Well, bottom line, Google it, look it up, go to ground zero. Agility is an empirical approach to value creation. What does that mean? It's evidence-based knowledge growth. It's about making things that actually help people. Agility is really a focus on, what are we trying to do? What are we, the collective, trying to do? What are we, the collective, trying to create? Who are we trying to create it for? Are we going to make the changes in their particular space in the way that they can particularly use it? So what does that mean? It's not about stand-ups and showcases and retros. It's about collaboration. And if you want to talk about one of the hardest skills you will ever learn, collaboration is it. This collaboration is not just throwing words at each other. Collaboration is where you hear something from an unexpected source and it bounces around inside your head and it changes what you thought you knew. And then you share that new knowledge. And that becomes a compounding environment where as soon as you say, wow, now I think this means that, someone else is going to pick up on what you've shared, and that's going to change their knowledge. And then someone else is going to pick up on that, and that's going to change their knowledge. And all of a sudden we get this like massive knowledge growth happening. So collaboration isn't just throwing words at each other. Collaboration is coming together and learning from each other. And that's a seriously hard skill. Now, one of the reasons why it's hard is because we're all so busy. I haven't got time to learn anything new. I really have to focus on being the rightest person in the room, get the meeting done as soon as I possibly can, share my knowledge and get out of there. That's not collaboration. So that's why agility is such a challenge to a lot of organizations. What else is it? It's about alignment on value. Now, what is good for you may not be good for me, but that's where we have the lift and shift away from the individuals to the collective. So we need to think about what is good for us. That's what we're looking for there. What's good for us? Another thing that we're looking at, data-driven decisions. What does that mean? Well, that means we don't make decisions off the cuff. We make decisions that are based on information, that is based on knowledge. It's based on what we can learn. It's based on research. Now, I love this. I love this because one of the most common myths around agility is that it's like free-form poetry. And that was a saying that a friend of ours from years ago, James King, he used to talk about agility as free-form poetry. And I think it's the best description ever because it's not. It is not make it up as you go along. Agility is the very, very deliberate practice of decision-making based on information. So when you think about agility and you start to think about some of the common practices you see, the whole point of iterating is to create feedback loops so you actually get data sets that tell you, are you heading in the right direction? Is this the right thing to do? And are we doing it in the right way? And then comes the other side of the decisions in an agile environment. What are we talking about there? We're talking about decision delegation. David Marquette, who wrote the book, Turn the Ship Around, he talks about intent-based leadership. And one of the things that he mentions frequently is take the authority to the information. When we start to look at an agile organization, not just IT, I'm talking about the whole of the business. What we're talking about is information everywhere. Everyone has access to the information they need to make the decisions, but most importantly, the decisions are made as close to the decision-making need as possible. So instead of your decisions having to go all the way up through the organizational hierarchy tree and then cascade all the way down again, we just go need decision, need decision, need decision, need decision. Obviously, the bigger the decision, the bigger the perspective of the people involved in the decision-making need to be. We are not going to make the brand new grad who just joined the company 3 weeks ago make a strategic decision. But we're going to let the grad figure out what is the best platform for them to be able to share their information with their team. So it's quite a difficult concept to break away from these frameworks that we have in our minds embedded around agility. But then that's another thing that agility is all about. It's about exploring options. It's not forecasting conclusions. What we would need to do, and the whole point around agility, is recognition that the complexity in our working environments is compounding. So there is no one person who knows everything and no one team who can deliver everything. So we actually have to think about how can we, small team, work collectively with we, big team, to create the value that we've aligned on. And the whole point of this is managing risk. Managing risk, not avoiding risk, managing risk. Everything we do has a risk attached to it. So this is another reason for those feedback loops. Oh, I can see there's a hand up. Is that a question?
Izzy, would you want to put your question into the Q&A box, please? We'll move on in the meantime.
So what we'll do is we'll get you to put your questions into the Q&A box, and Shane, who's very patient with me and knows my cadence and he can recognize when I'm about to take a breath, then he'll jump in and he'll say, hey, Sharon, here's a question. So if you put them in the boxes, that's great. Now, when it comes to everything, when you boil it all down, agility is about learning and adjusting. It's not about delivering against a predefined plan against all odds. It's about being self-aware. It's about being prepared to create a plan, because you need a plan, absolutely. But learning from the execution of the plan, because we can't predict the future and no one knows what tomorrow is going to bring. So I'll just pause there to give Shane an opportunity to jump in. Nothing?
Well, hasn't come in.
All righty. Well, I'll keep on going. So you're asking yourself, well, Sharon, why are we talking about this? And this is why. 71% of global businesses are using Agile methods these days. That's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, there's very, very few things globally that 70% of us would consistently do. But what we're seeing is agility is escaping the IT departments. It started in software development, and there's an 86% adoption rate in firms that focus on software development. But what I want you to do is I want you to look very deeply at your organizations, and I want you to think about any organization that doesn't have some sort of digital footprint. Now, you may not be using software that you created yourselves, but you are using software that has been created by someone. And we've got to be aware of that, because the way that we create software has to change as much as the software that we're using. So when we start to look at these numbers, you can see why everyone's on this Agile bandwagon. Why are we talking about this? And even more importantly, there's been an 88% growth in Agile adoption in the past 20 years. Now, that's pretty impressive. But what it also means is there is no one true way of doing agility. Every organization does it differently, and so it should. So when we start to look at agility as a tool that we can use inside our businesses, we've got to really recognize that we can't just copy someone else. Absolutely cracker presentation by our colleague Craig Smith. He's done this a few times. Absolutely fabulous. 40 Agile methods in 40 minutes. It's just an incredibly powerful learning journey. But it's this concept has been picked up. And recently Forbes published an article from Steve Denning talking about agility. We've got to be thinking about agility in the idea that it's not a pre-described set of tools. Agility is about thinking differently. And we've always got the greatest case study that we've seen in our modern age, COVID. COVID tells me that any organization that exists today is by definition agile. COVID drove us into rapid adjustments. COVID made us think very long and hard about our supply lines, our value streams. And it really got us focused on business resilience. So here we've got an example of many organizations going instantly agile. And what was the thing? What did we see when this happened? We saw organizations align on their customer and start to say, what does our customer actually need? Who are we doing this for? And focus on that. And then get rid of all of the extraneous fluff that fills up our days and just focus on get operational as soon as we possibly can. So if you think about the changes that happen inside your organizations between March and June in 2020, you will see an exponential rate of change. This focus on customer centricity is key as well. Amazon has a lot of very, very powerful tools that they use. There's one that I particularly enjoy, and it's called customer centricity. And the way that they make this real, and this is what agility is about, it's about making your tools real and tangible and accessible. When they're having a meeting and they're talking about new products, new services, new approaches, they have an empty chair in the meeting room, and that's the customer's chair. And they all pay attention to it, and they call it out, and they talk to each other about what does the customer need? What does the customer want? And if they can't answer the question, they go and find out. So why is this important? This explains one of the key concepts associated with agility. Agility is driven by value rather than by ego. So you know that you're working in an agile environment when it's not about who said the thing, when it's about what value are we going to create. What does that mean to you guys? What questions have you got for me?
I'm just going to insert a comment here. Sarah reminded us that Craig will actually be doing his 40 Agile Ways in 40 Minutes webinar for us in the fairly short-term future. So watch out for the announcement from the soft ed.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And now there is a question. Agile is considered as free form and each business can adopt the Agile model. Is it possible to combine Agile with other forms methods such as the waterfall method?
Right, I'm going to answer this, and Shane is just going to stand up and walk away because I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. And the reason I can say that is because when Winston Royce started to talk about the waterfall method, everything that I'm about to share with you is built into waterfall. Everything. What's happened is organizations have taken the waterfall method and bastardized it to suit their own needs. And then what happens is they lose the value bits around waterfall or Scrum or SAFe, any framework. You can use it as long as you're doing these things. So what are the things that you need to do? First of all, situational awareness is the key. Now, you'll notice here, I am not talking about technology. I am talking about a business concept. As an organization, as a business, as a corporation, small enterprise, startup, doesn't matter. When we start to talk about what agility actually is, it is about being aware of where you are and where you want to go. But even more importantly, it's about seeing the truth. So with agility, we carry a big load of psychological safety because we need to be allowed to tell each other the truth and do honest impact assessments. So every time there's a decision made, we need to understand what is the impact of that decision. Now, what this means is we're divorcing ego. We are taking the leader who likes to thump the table and yell and scream and say, no, I don't care what you're telling me. It must be done by next Thursday. That's not reality. So agility is about facing reality, and it's about using what we know, not guesses, not make-believe, not what we would want it to be. So we're going to gather feedback, we're going to use feedback, and we're going to use metrics. So this is where the whole freeform poetry around agility as a concept just flies out the window straight away. One of the things that we're looking for is we're looking for an approach that allows us to gather data as we go. Now, the other thing that agility is all about is working as a team. And this is where when you look at all of the delivery frameworks, every one of them, it doesn't matter which one you're looking at, they're all about creating information and knowledge that is passed on to the next part of the value team that we're working with. So when we talk about working as a team in agility, we're zooming out, we're looking big. We're talking about the organizational team as opposed to looking at the micro team or the individual team. So we're looking big and we're saying, okay, let's talk about what does this mean to us as a team? And this means collaboration. Because what a decision means to marketing is totally different to what the decision means to finance, totally different to what it means to tech, totally different to what it means to the sales team. Now, the other cycle that we have here is we actually close the feedback loop so that when the sales team tells the customer that they've sold a product that doesn't exist yet, we work with them to support them, rather than getting all upset about it and sitting back and crossing our arms and saying, well, we're not going to do that. So why do we need to do this? Now, the situational awareness is cornerstone in any sort of business venture, because in our business environment, not our tech environments, not our software environments, in our business environments, we focused on what the customer needs. But the bad news is these are not always knowable. We can't always predict the future. I mean, you look at some of the big bang disruptors that we've had in the past 10, 15 years. You know, you look at the Ubers of the world. You look at the Airbnbs of the world. If you had floated that, if you had gone into an organization to pitch those, they would have laughed you out of the room. But now they're literally cornering the market. And gosh knows what's coming up tomorrow. Gosh knows what changes are appearing. All right, here's a question for you. 3 years ago, how many people said AI outside of any sort of, I don't know, doom-based apocalyptic movie? Now you can tell I'm loving AI. Look at my imagery. I am graphically challenged, but I can use a tool to enhance me, and I can use a tool to help create a better understanding. So we've got the AI, we've got the Internet of Things, we've got digital transformation, we've got virtual webinars. You know, we've got so many things that are happening that are different than we could have imagined 5 years ago. So if we extrapolate into the future, what's that going to look like? So this is where agility is all about the customer centricity. We really need to pay attention to our customer needs. We need to make our future, not predict it. And we need to challenge our own assumptions about what good looks like, what right looks like. We have to face reality. And the whole point of agility is it makes you. The tools and techniques that we use inside agility, you know, when we talk about visual planning and collaboration, and we talk about feedback loops and iterative delivery cycles, that's all about getting the right information to the right people so that we can learn and adjust. The way that I like to talk about customer centricity is, for any customer-facing role, you're actually like an explorer, and you're exploring the future. But the bad news is you haven't got a map to follow. There's no path that you know is the right way forward. You're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to try different trails and different approaches and different techniques to see what is the thing that the customer grabs hold of. And we can't predict that. Gosh, if we could, the world would be a different place. And what we need to do is recognize that we can't guarantee an outcome in any particular way. Because we can't guarantee an outcome in any particular way, that means we need to be prepared to learn and adjust. We need to pivot. We need to change our approach. If it's not working, if our customers aren't happy, we have to listen to them.
Horrifying.
Sorry?
Horrifying thought.
Imagine.
To our customers.
I know. I know. But this is hard. This is super hard. Because I know that when you're working with passionate people, one of the things that they do is they become very right. They become the rightest person in the room, and they don't want you to challenge their assumptions. And, you know what it's like when someone challenges your status quo and someone says, oh, are you sure that's true? And this is the awareness, self-awareness that comes with agility. And it's really focusing on, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not the rightest person in the room. And that's super hard as well. So what do we need to do? The next thing is we need to think end to end. And we need to think about it in terms of value streams. Now, if nothing else, COVID taught us about supply chains. All right? It did, because all of a sudden we started to figure out where our stuff comes from and where our stuff that we create goes to. Having an understanding of the supply chain or the value stream that we're embedded in means that you can make better decisions around your part of that supply chain based on your knowledge of what's happening after you have had input into the value stream. But you can also guide the people who are upstream from you. And you can start to give them feedback, and you start to say things, well, you've given me this thing, but it doesn't actually work for me, so I have to invest time in changing it. And what we get there is we get a very, very rapid rate of change. And we actually start to make the world a better person for the downstream parts. Make the world a better place for the downstream parts. So make the world a better person, that's not right. And what we then do is we start to see whether or not we've got value alignment. Because, as I said, what I think is good may be different to what you think is good. And then we can do some really powerful maths. Now, if we're talking about agility in a business context, cost-benefit analysis, that's ground zero. We have to make sure that everything we are doing is adding up to the right degree of value for our customers and for the organization. Because we can't do things that are going to put us out of business. So what does that do? What do we do then? What are we thinking about? Well, first of all, we've got to make sure that everything is visible. Everyone needs to see what's going on and when it's happening. And we've got to be really transparent. If it's working, great, keep doing it. If it's not working, stop. But it means we've got to have the courage to be able to tell someone that what they've done isn't providing the value. But we can have that courage if we actually work as a team. The other thing that we need to think about is corner cutting and not doing it. We need to shift away from this short-term thinking and the creation of these fragile items that barely withstand, market forces. Oh gosh, if there's two words in the Agile concepts that are truly abused, the first one is agility, where people say the word as a weapon and they use it against each other, and then the other one, MVP. The way that people use the concepts around MVP, oh my gosh, MVP is not a shortcut. It's not version 1, and it's not vaporware. MVP is a learning tool. And what we need to recognize is that agility is about creating stable, repeatable, meaningful patterns of value creation. And we need them to be stable, repeatable, and meaningful so we can measure them. Because then we also want to regularly review and update them. We don't keep on doing the same old if it's not adding value. So we're looking for those value add things, and we're looking to maximize the value add things. So what does that mean in an organization? Leverage everything. Everything that is part of the organization is there to be used, there to be shared, and there to be focused on creation of value. Everything. So we need problem solving from all of the perspectives of the organization. So we need a problem looked at from the HR perspective, from the marketing perspective, from the tech stack perspective, from the finance perspective, from the logistics perspective, from the procurement perspective. We need to consider all of those perspectives before we jump in and try and solve a problem. Because one of the adages we have in continuous improvement is that today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. So we've got to make sure that we're actually looking at the problem holistically. But we need to make connections between the information. Each of us, there's no way, because we actually live inside our own heads. Each of us is a knowledge silo. So part of our mandate is to get our information out. Not everything, not complete white noise information overload, but targeted specific knowledge that I have that you need. So we've got to create the connections to that. That means we've got to work as a team. We don't build barriers by putting meetings at different times or only inviting the right people to the meetings. We ask the hard people to come. We challenge ourselves around making sure we are asking the hard questions of each other and of ourselves. But we also create a space to do things differently. And this is the hard bit. This is the hard bit, because you can't just treat your organization like a snow globe and shake it up and move everything around. There has to be a degree of stability so you can deliver the business, okay? But you need to look for ways that you can do little bits better. It's not throw everything out. It's pay attention to what's going on. Think about how we can do something better, differently. But also pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace. Have a look around. There are so many modern tools and techniques and practices that are out there. People are constantly inventing new ways of doing things. So look for them and use them. I am not talking about shadow IT or creating tech stacks on tech stacks or implementing the new tool. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is, how can you learn from each other better? What types of tools can you use to grow knowledge? How can you create your own networks inside your organizations? They're the types of modern practices that I'm talking about. And if you actually start to dig deep, you can see that the one thing that's happened over the past 10 years is the value of collaboration has really been recognized. And there's a lot of work happening in that space around creating collaborative networks inside organizations, information flows, and creating the space where people can actually feel safe enough to contribute. So we want to leverage every part of the organization and every person in the organization. Then we get the hardest bit of all. Because when we start to talk about modern working practices, when we start to talk about shifting away from rigidly structured delivery frameworks, and we actually start to think about value, it means that we need to pivot towards immersive leadership. And when you start to talk about collaborative networks of information flow, you start to realize why there is such a difference between leadership and management. It's easy to manage things. It's hard to lead. The reason being, when you are doing management, you break things into widgets and you just make sure the widgets are lined up in the right order. But people aren't widgets, ideas aren't widgets, and knowledge isn't widgets. So when we start to talk about the shift to collaborative networked teams, we're talking about creating a leadership dynamic which helps leaders give their teams time to connect, time to share, time to learn from each other, time to collaborate. And that means we've got to give each other exposure to knowledge and information. It means that we need to shift away from this idea of being busy and every keystroke is monitored. And we've got to create spaces for people to share what they know and meet new people and gather more information from them. And what does this mean for us? Well, it's really hard, because what you're going to end up doing is, when you start to look at your modern working environment, you're going to see this thing known as a value team or a cross-functional team. But it's not a technology cross-functional team. There is going to be people from marketing, there's going to be people from HR, there's going to be people from finance, there's going to be people from logistics, there's going to be procurement people, there's going to be salespeople, there's going to be customers. They're all going to be part of this team. and they're all going to speak different languages. So the first thing that the leader does is works to create the shared language, works to create this alignment around value. And the whole point here is if everyone knows why they're doing something collectively, then they're going to be able to figure out the best how in this case. And this again reflects this idea around there's no one true framework that caters for every one of those things. Now, the other thing that you'll notice on this slide here, and I very deliberately put it as lowercase, all right? Everything else there is like uppercase. It's a deliberate defect because I want it to stand out. I want you to think about this concept of mutual respect. This is a really difficult thing in our workplaces these days. Really difficult. I mean, how often do you talk about us and them? And this may be a team that you're working with and you're like, they. If you do a simple thing, if you shift your language to we, and if you start to talk about we need to work together to create the right outcome, then you actually start to realize that there is value in every part of the organization. And we actually need to reach out to them. Now, from a leadership perspective, oh my goodness gracious me, this is really hard. This means that you need to be open and you need to be available and you need to be reaching out to other leaders to create a leadership network and availability across the organization. And that's why I call it immersive leadership. This is what agility is about. So when you think about the organizations who are nailing agility, right, I want you to think about those organizations. And it's pretty easy to spot them. They're the organizations who are just nailing it, full stop. You know, they are conquering the markets. They are creating new products. They're the places that everyone's queuing up to go and work at. That's what we want in an organization. One of the things that we've noticed over the past decade or so in terms of agility is Agile has been used as a weapon to create factories. And we end up seeing teams that are just embedded in a production line. That's not mutually respectful. So when we start to talk about agility outside of technology, these are the things that we want to be focusing on. Information, collaboration, cross-functional teams, value alignment, but most importantly, mutual respect. So why bother? Why would we change this? Why would we change what we do and how we do it? Well, bottom line is it's the only way to survive. And we all know that Darwin quote, you know, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, it's the most adaptable. Our environment is not going to stop changing. Our path to the future is going to keep on evolving. So as an agile organization, it's not just your tech team. Every part of the organization, we are learning and adapting. We're changing. We're pivoting with what is happening in the marketplace. We're pivoting what's happening in our environments, in our countries, in our politics. There's so much going on these days that we need to be aware of. And the whole point of this is we need to set ourselves up to change, to grow, and most importantly, to thrive. That's what we want to do. We want to thrive. We want to make work a place that we enjoy being at, and we want to give each other the opportunity to thrive as an individual, but also as a team. All right, well, I'm going to end it there. Are there any questions? Can't open it up for discussion.
So, folks, please pop your questions into the Q&A box. There's none pressing at the moment, but Sharon, I will put to you a thought that popped to my mind. You made the point very early on that agility is this empirical approach, and it's data-driven. What do we do when the data is hard to get?
Work harder at getting it. I'm sorry. I'm super sorry. But I mean, we can't create value by braille. We can't do it. We actually have to have data in our face. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So when you get access to the slides, which we will make available to you, I'll put the links to some of the materials that I used in the slide. There's others in the slide deck as well. A brilliant quote by Lisa Atkins is here. Instead of thinking of agility as something to do or something to be, think of it as emergent responses that help us thrive in change and disruption. So I'll stop the slideshow here, but I'll lean into the question that Shane just asked while other questions are coming in. And the reason that
building on that one, what do you do when you don't trust the data that's available?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. And this is why I emphasize that we need to focus on truth, telling the truth to authority. So when you're talking about data sets, you need to make sure you've got multi-dimensional data sets. So you can't have mono-dimensional data. You need to be looking at the information from different perspectives. And the best thing about this is if you get one set of data that looks a little bit hinky and you're thinking, well, I'm not sure that that's right, I don't trust it, you can investigate. But always trust yourself. If you don't think the data is right, do some more research. Go and find out some more. Go and see if you can get another perspective. Ask a different person. Because, data is as fragile as anyone else. And if you ask the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong information. So we often talk about vanity metrics, and I'm sure you've heard about those. They make us look good, but actually don't tell us anything of value. It's like those mirrors that you have at the fun park, the ones that make you look tall and thin when you're actually not.
Right, another one coming in. Do you think the word agile has been being used less? And what words do you think people are using instead?
Yes, I do. And I thank that. I thank that as a thing. So what words are being used instead? Modern working practices, contemporary working arrangements, value-based models. There's so many things that are replacing the word agile. And the reason is it's had such a bad rap. It's being done so badly. And so many organizations have tried and tried and tried, and they've tried to do it exactly right. And there is no exactly right way. So they're moving away from it. But what I'm seeing a lot is organizations who have recognized the value of the principles and the values behind agility, the collaboration and the cross-functional teams and the value streams, and they've recognized that those are tools that really work. So they're grabbing hold of those and they're calling it their new way of working. So if you look in corporate Australia, you're going to see a lot of WOWs out there. WOW stands for ways of working, and almost every organization has their own WOW. I used to create WOWs as a day job, but what we're talking about here is really permeating. That's the word I'm looking for. The agile principles permeating just the culture of an organization, and this was always the secret sauce to agility. It's not a framework that you just swap out a bunch of processes with waterfall attached to them and bang in a bunch of processes with agile attached to them. If you're going to be operating in an environment that's constantly changing, you need to have the right culture. And it doesn't matter what tool you use, it's about the right culture. It's about the problem solving and the leaning into the decisions, and it's about focusing on value. They're the types of things that we look for.
So this leads to a question that Abby's put up there. Do you think that our traditional command and control style of leadership is part of the challenge to organizational agility? We rely on the tried and true approaches over giving different things a go. Risk aversion perhaps being a barrier here.
100%. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. But I'm going to tell you a story. A long time ago, I was in the Australian Army. And it was one of the most agile organizations that I've ever been in. At which stage you're going to say, what? Because the army, any military structure, is very structured command and control. And the answer is yes, it is. But as soon as you leave your base and you go out on a patrol and you're executing a mission, you're on your own. So the leadership in most military organizations knows that you need to have the information to hand while you are away from base. Okay? So traditional command and control structures literally can't move at the rate of information need. So when you're working in an agile organization, what you see is information is all over the place and it's flowing up and down and sideways, and people are allowed to collaborate with each other and they're allowed to ask their senior leaders really hard questions, and senior leaders come to showcases and they give their input in a fluid, dynamic, needs-based environment, as opposed to a structured, rigid, ego-based hierarchy. Now, the whole point here is that information goes through filters. So everything that Sharon knows and everything that Sharon says goes through the Sharon filter. So I will tell you things that I think are important for you to know. That's a one-way information flow. I may be wrong, and the only way that I know whether or not I'm sharing the right information is if you ask me questions about it, if I'm telling you the wrong stuff, or if I tell you to do something, you go away and do it, and it's the wrong thing. Now, what happens in traditional command and control environments is your boss will just yell at you and say, that's wrong, that's not what I asked for. Most of us do exactly what our bosses ask for. We love to do that because, that's good. It's good value. We don't deliberately make mistakes. But rigid command and control structures have very, very few mirrors in them, and very, very few traditional leaders are comfortable with the idea that they may actually have a team who knows more about the outcome that needs to be produced than the leader does. So what we do here is we talk about the difference between technical leadership. Technical leaders are those leaders who think they are the smartest in the room and they know how to do the thing, versus adaptive leadership. That's leaders who know that their job is to create space for problem solving and make sure we've got the right people in the space. So leaders who are answer givers tend to represent the older style of leadership. Modern leadership is very different, very different. And modern leadership is around adaptive and immersive leaders, leaders who create the space and give you time to learn and think and collaborate and to close those feedback loops.
Justin asks, what is something businesses should be careful of when using the Agile method? There are a lot of positives, but what could potentially be seen as a negative? What are the gotchas?
Brilliant. So the gotchas are the lip service Agile approaches that we take. So this is where we put in Agile as a process and we don't think about information flows, or we don't change our leadership approaches, or we don't build cross-functional teams. And we just put agility in and get everyone working iteratively and working as hard as they possibly can without any opportunity for feedback loops or metrics or improvement. And we burn our teams out. We burn them out because we're just flogging people. We're saying, you've got 2 weeks, go. You've got 2 weeks, go. You've got 2 weeks, go. And this is why some of the language around agility is really flawed. I mean, I really, really reject the idea of calling something a sprint, because in my mind, sprint means run as fast as you possibly can until you fall over. That's what sprint means. But that's not how I want to work. I want to work at a pace that's focused on creation of value, absolutely, but is also sustainable and is not going to get me getting to the end of the year and falling over in a heap. Yeah, my job is to come.
Sorry, go, Shane. One of the core principles is sustainable
pace. Yeah, but we lose that. That's what happens. Organizations, they're like, increase your velocity, go faster, go faster, go faster. It's like, that's not what it's about. The other thing is agility. When you start to look at the patterns of behavior inside agility, you start to see that it is around thinking, learning, growing together. When organizations basically use backlogs as de facto requirements documents and they're just pushing information one way through the system, that's another anti-pattern. That's when you see there's no feedback loops here. And we're just basically treating the people who are creating the stuff, we're just treating them as robots on a production line. Whereas what we want is we want the people who are creating the stuff, the things that the business produces, we want them to be telling us better ways to produce it because they're the ones who know.
Individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
Oh, Shane's read it.
All right. Well, there's no more questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to pull us to a close. But I do want to do the place commercial here. Folks, Sharon did mention the use of AI and how important AI tools are becoming today. Well, at SoftEd, we have two new classes, AI for business analysis and AI for project management, that are really focused on how you can leverage these new technologies in the roles and work that you are doing. So just a call out that these classes are available. Have a look at them on the SoftEd website. And of course, we'd love to see you on one of these classes.
Oh, but don't forget, Shane, we've also got the business agility course as well.
We have the business agility course, personally for me, one of my absolute favorites. Let me pop up that. And of course, now I can't find it on the screen. That's the.
But the whole point of this is I want you to, if you take nothing else away from the time that we've spent together today, really realize that agility is no longer, confined to the IT department. It's not a technology approach. It's actually a business approach that allows us to operate and pivot and adjust no matter what comes.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much. It's fascinating, valuable information that I certainly, as always, have really enjoyed the great thoughts that you bring to us. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Shane. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions.